I love the intrigue and I love the mystery that it expresses. And a part of me doesn't ever really want to find out exactly what it is because that would just strip it of its mystery and magic.
Take a playful look with Enfys Book as they roll for crit hits with pagan wordsmiths.
Hi there, and welcome to 4 Quick Cues, Book Talk with Enfys. I'm Enfys J. Book, and on this show, I ask pagan authors 4 quick questions chosen by a roll of the dice. Today, I am super stoked to interview Kristoffer Hughes, pronouns he, him, and she, her, who is chief of the Angelesey Druid Order, an award-winning author of several books, and creator of 3 tarot decks. He's also a native Welsh speaker who resides on the Isle of Angelesey, North Wales. He's a Welsh language TV presenter and actor. Kristoffer, welcome. I'm so happy to have you on the show.
I'm very happy to be here. Thank you very much for the invite. It's a joy and a pleasure.
Yay. It's always fun to talk to people across the pond. It's like the miracle of the internet.
I know, her. Do you remember there was a point where you used to watch the news and there was always a delay if they were talking to somebody in the US, and all of that has gone miraculously.
Technology's come a long way. Now, have you ever been interviewed by a 20-sided dice before?
I must admit, I don't think I've ever seen a 20-sided dice, let alone been interviewed by one.
Oh, well.
Oh, that's pretty.
You're in for a treat. Yeah, it's this lovely, for folks, because we're audio only, it's this amethyst kind of swirly D20 with gold numbers on it. It's kind of nice. So what would you like to name our little random friend today for the purposes of this interview?
Well, the most sensible option would be for me to call the dice Myfanwy. Myfanwy, yes, because
I'm going to have to write that down.
Myfanwy. So my old dear friend Myfanwy, she's no longer with us, bless her. She loved dice, as it happened, and she would collect dice from various board games that she'd find in jumble sales and flea markets and car boot sales, and she had a pot full of dice. And seeing that she's no longer here, I think I'll call the D20 after her, Myfanwy, the collector of dice.
Myfanwy, I love that. All right, well, Myfanwy, let's get to the first question and see what randomness you have in store. Question 13.
Ooh,
I think this is a great one considering your subject matter. Do you believe in ghosts?
Oh my word, do I believe in ghosts? Do you know, I have a really peculiar relationship with ghosts. So I've worked with the dead for 32 years. I only retired from working with the dead just over 2 years ago. But it's still very much a part of my life. I'm still a celebrant. I still consider myself to be death adjacent. And I've had the weirdest, wackiest experiences with the preternatural or the supernatural through my work or by proxy of my work. So much so that a lot of them just appear as normal, everyday occurrences. And whilst I've had these experiences, oddly enough, I don't believe in ghosts.
Fascinating.
I've had the most incredible experiences. But when I say that I don't believe in ghosts, I probably have to unpack that ever so slightly. What I don't believe is that the phenomena that I've encountered have been devoid of consciousness. None of them have displayed any form of consciousness or any form of sentiency. They've appeared as if almost like an echo or a signature of something that was and is somehow attached to the thing that was once animate. And yet I've never experienced sentiency or consciousness from any of those experiences. And there's been so many. I keep thinking I should write a book about it. But so I always surprise people when people ask me that. I did a show last year with a stand-up comedian here in the UK called Kiri Pritchard McLean. We did a show called Anomalies, and she's a really famous stand-up comedian on English television. And, you know, I just do Welsh TV stuff. And we got to tour with this show called Anomalies that was all about the hereafter and ghosts. And it would really surprise people when I would say, yeah, I've seen a lot of weird stuff, but I don't actually believe in ghosts, because the usual definition of a ghost is the disembodied spirit of a deceased person. But that's not been my experience of ghosts. it's been something else that I still can't quite put my finger on, It's very peculiar. And I had a really peculiar experience with my partner. My partner actually came to London. I was working at a morgue in London, and I think I needed to get home for some urgent reason, and he had to come down and pick me up. And he came to the morgue. It was very late, like 9, 10 o'clock at night. And when he walked in, there was a woman standing in the corridor. And then I saw a fleeting image of this lady standing in the corridor. And he was quite taken aback by it. And he said, who was that woman? I said, she's in the fridge. He's like, what? That was it. She's dead. What you've seen is some kind of a shade or a shadow of a person who is a resident in the morgue. And he said the same. He said that there was nothing there. It was completely devoid, and yet there was this shade present. And it's happened to so many of my colleagues and friends in my workplace that I love the intrigue and I love the mystery that it expresses. And a part of me doesn't ever really want to find out exactly what it is, because that would just strip it of its mystery and magic. It's kind of amazing and magical when it happens, and I appreciate them happening. Not that I see so much of it anymore now that I've left the morgue, but there was a lot. There was an awful lot.
I would love to talk to you about those ghost experiences for like hours, because I bet you have so many good stories. But alas, our D20 demands more questions. So Mvanwi, I got my Mvanwi. Did I say that correctly?
You did, Mvanwi,
okay.
yeah.
Mvanwi. Let's ask question 2, which is all about writing. Question 8. What is your favorite word?
My favorite word is discombobulation.
That's a good word.
And I think it's probably because I spend so much of my time in a state of discombobulated bewilderment that I feel perpetually bewildered sometimes. And when you try to keep so many pieces of your life fluid and sometimes also in place, and it can be quite discombobulating. And I tend to use that word very often. Maybe unconsciously I use it a lot. And yet I'm not entirely sure if it's a word that has found its way into my writing. Oh, I'm not sure. I might have to go back now into every manuscript and go into the find function and see whether I've used discombobulated in any of my work. But I love that word. I find it very descriptive. And because English is my second language, right? So I sometimes use words that are fairly arcane, because I had a very old-fashioned English teacher when I was a teenager. She was really old-fashioned. She used to get me to read Cranford as exercises for learning English, which is a Victorian novel by Elizabeth Gaskell, and it's written like yesteryear. And so I'll occasionally say peculiar things like, I'll see you on the morrow. And people are always quite surprised by that. And yet to me, it feels quite normal. And she was always in a state of discombobulation. She used to wear kaftans and wide-brimmed hats indoors, regardless of the season or the weather. She was fabulous, and I loved her. And she taught me the word discombobulate. And I think I take after her in being in a frequent state of discombobulation.
I can't remember if it's the Minneapolis, or the Milwaukee airport, but one of them, just as you get past the security, it has a recombobulation area. It's labeled the recombobulation area, where you just, like, now that you've had to take everything out of your pockets and everything out of your jacket and all of that, this is where you put yourself back together post security, and there are benches for doing this, and then you go back into the airport. So you can add that to your lexicon in addition to discombobulation is recombobulation.
Oh, I love it. I want to visit this recombobulation area. That's such an appropriate term for it as well, isn't it?
It absolutely is.
Because airports are so discombobulating.
They really are.
Discombobulating.
Yes, absolutely.
But I love that word. I absolutely love it. Maybe I use it too often. I'm not sure.
I have words I fixate on, but I think I go through phases with them where it's like I'm using this word way too much for like a few weeks, and then I'll move on to a different word I use way too much. All right, let's ask the next question, which is our other professional questions, number 14. What is the most surprising thing someone has said about your books or tarot decks?
The most surprising thing. Oh, I do know actually. There was one. It was I wrote a book about death called As the Last Leaf Falls, like a perspective of death and dying from a pagan angle, And I'd given a talk about it at a pagan federation conference in the south of England. And this lady came up to me afterwards, and she had that book with her in its earliest iteration, when it was called The Journey into Spirit. And she said, "Oh, would you sign this copy that I've already got?" And I said, "Of course I will." And she said, "You have such beautiful English." And it completely threw me, because I have a horrific imposter syndrome when it comes to speaking or writing in English, because I keep expecting people to find me out, that I'm a fraud, that I'm not English. And somebody's going to find out, and there's this horrible fear that comes with expressing myself in English and writing in English, because it just isn't my first language. It's not the language I'm the most comfortable speaking or writing. So for her to say that, it completely threw me, and I think I looked at her utterly aghast, and my eyes welled up, because I think it was the first time anybody had made a comment about the English that I was using in my books. And it's the one thing that I'm the most insecure about, is the quality of my English. And and that's never ever going to weigh. I think that just comes with the territory of a language being your second language. I have a third language. I speak some Finnish, and I also feel somewhat of an imposter every time I'm in Finland trying to speak to people in Finnish. So for this lady to say, "You have such beautiful English," it just completely threw me. And it meant so much that this total stranger had felt compelled to compliment me on my words. And and so many people will say such beautiful things specifically about that book, and I really appreciate it when people say it helped me understand my grief, or helped me work through my grief. I love all of those comments, but there was just something about the quality of that comment that really, really cut me down to the core. And I guess it was because it addressed an anxiety that I carry as a writer. And I know we all carry anxieties. All writers, I think, have anxieties about their work. And but mine is quite peculiar in that I write in a second language, and it feels as if I'm an imposter. It's really peculiar. I try and get over it, but I just can't.
Having had conversations with you at Pagonicon this year, and also seeing you teach at Pagonicon, which was fabulous, by the way. If anyone listening to this, if you get a chance to see Kristoffer speak, highly, highly, highly recommend it. Some of the most dynamic, engaging workshops I've ever been to. If I hadn't been told you were not a native English speaker, I would not have known, because you seem very, very comfortable speaking and presenting. And yeah, I never would have guessed you were not a native English speaker.
Oh, thank you. That's lovely. Thank you so much. Oh.
Just for what it's worth. All right, we come now to our random encounter question.
Random encounter question.
And this is our question where we choose from 80 possibilities. So our Mavanwi is being joined by a little four-sided die for this one. So let's see what they have to ask. 11 and 4. What is the best concert you've ever been to?
Oh, my word. Okay. Without a doubt, in 2019, the year before everything went peculiar, my partner and I, we went to Ostia Antica, which is the ancient port of Rome. And Ostia Antica is about 35 miles to the west of Rome, and it's right on the coast. And the ancient port of Rome is this enormous, vast ancient city that's still there. It takes hours and hours to walk around it. And it has this amphitheatre, this stunning, beautiful amphitheatre surrounded by these gorgeous olive trees. And the centre of the place was amazing. And we went there in July of 2019 to watch Loreena McKennitt live at Ostia Antica Amphitheatre. And the atmosphere was just electric. When we arrived, the sun was setting. So they'd closed the city to ordinary visitors, and only ticket holders for the concert were allowed back in at dusk. And the sun was setting in front. The view that we had from this amphitheatre was the sun setting over these olive trees and over the hills in the distance and over and out towards the sea. And it was absolutely spectacular, and her voice was just like melting butter over a hot crumpet. It was amazing. The seats were diabolical. We had the foresight to take some kind of cushioning, but our backs were absolutely wrecked. But we were so enthralled by being in a place that was 2,600 years old, sitting on original steps that people would have watched productions 2,600 years ago. And there we were in the same spirit. And it felt as if somehow her concert, her being there, us being there, was this thread through time that weaved all of those times together. It was incredibly magical. We've just seen her in London only 3 or 4 months ago at the London Palladium, a beautiful theatre, but it wasn't a patch on the experience of being in a concert in an ancient amphitheatre. And I love Loreena McKennitt anyway, but I loved the experience itself, not just her performance. It was the fact that we were in a place that spoke so much history, and it was balmy and beautifully warm and delicious. The whole thing was just magical beyond words. Absolutely magical. And she's doing it again later this summer. Oh, she's apparently at an amphitheatre in Greece, on one of the Grecian islands, later in August or September, I think. So I'm very tempted to see if I can get there, because there's something quite magical about being in those places and engaging in what people engaged in all those years ago. It was fabulous. I loved it.
That sounds absolutely incredible. I wish I could have been there. The word picture you're painting of that just sounds absolutely amazing. Well, Kristoffer, we've come to the end of the 4 quick questions. And at this point, I would love it if you could talk about anything you would love to share with our listeners. We're not on TV. We can see each other while we're recording this, but it's audio only. But I would love if you could share with our listeners anything you're excited about right now, whether it's current projects or events, or, the wonderful Bee Tarot, which has just absolutely gorgeous art and really has some beautiful symbolism about bees weaving life and their connection with Druidry and how they appear through folklore and myths. And I think it's a gorgeous deck. But yeah, anything you'd love to let people know about, the floor is yours.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, definitely the Bee Tarot. The Bee Tarot is just out there at the moment. And as we're talking, it's being released in the UK today. So it's been out in the US for a couple of months, but it takes a while before it reaches the United Kingdom. So I get to do something with that this evening to try and celebrate the fact that it's here. But I'm so happy with it. Bees have brought to my life and my husband's life so much joy. Apart from, I must say, I came home last night to discover my husband's hand was 3 times its normal size after having been stung by one of his bees. And so we have this visceral, quite literally visceral relationship with the bees who live at the bottom of our garden. And we have bees as well in other locations on the island. They connect us so much to the natural world. And when I was researching the Bee Tarot and looking at cultures around the world that have relationships with bees, it's every culture every society, almost every community that you look at will have folklore, mythology, or ancient traditions that are connected intimately with bees. And the bee queendom has literally flown side by side with the development and evolution of humanity. And maybe sometimes we don't look to them for the secrets and the wisdoms that they can teach us. They can teach us so much about what it means to be connected not only to the cycles of the season, but to things that are far more local, the flora and fauna of your square mile, the weather and how it impacts your square mile. I love the folklore that surrounds bees. I love getting up in the morning, making my coffee, going out into the garden, sitting on the bench and telling them the news of yesterday and telling them how I feel, telling them what's happening in the world, what I've just heard on BBC Radio 4. I love that connection is and sometimes it's very visceral. Sometimes they don't want to be your friend. Sometimes they sting. They're trying to protect their hive after all. But then there's a symbiotic relationship with them as well that my husband certainly feels more than I do. I tend to be a beekeeper by proxy, or an adjacent beekeeper. He's the one who gets down and dirty inside the hive. And it just felt that it lent itself, well, it's always lent itself so well to my spirituality as a Druid because of the way it connects me to the natural world. And we have this beautiful adage here in the UK, which is ask the wild bee what the old Druids knew. And I love that. It's as if they carry that wisdom. They carry the wisdom of not only the natural world, but of these quintessential priests of nature that is so ingrained into British culture, into British identity. And that lent itself so well to superimposing that wisdom and all of those traditions. I had to edit it, obviously, because there's far too many societies and communities on our planet to be limited to 78 images. But I tried to incorporate as many as I could into single images. And the tarot has been a profound and deep love of mine since I was a teenager. That was the door. The tarot and mythology were the doors that opened this world that I live in now to my teenage self as something that was very real, was very profound and transformative. And I'm glad to have been able to fuse two of the things that I love the most, tarot and the bees, into one product that so far people have found really inspiring, and I love that. And I really hope that not only will people enjoy it as a tarot deck, but that people might just get on their computer and think, oh, what does it take to keep a bee hive? What do I need to do? And who are my local beekeepers? And where can I get honey from? And how can I help the world through bees? But you can go to Bees for Development. There's all sorts of charities that help third world nations and nations that are not as advantaged as we are in the West to keep bees, because it brings so much to people's lives. And the bees will change your life if only we stop and take note of them. So that's part and parcel of my drive to create this deck, is to change people's perception of them and to move into accordance with their wisdom. And so far I've had some amazing feedback from people, so I'm really pleased that it does a service not only to my love of tarot but also to the bee queendom at large. I'm very happy with it.
And who is the artist on the deck again? Because the art is just so beautiful.
It's so lovely. And we struck gold. Definitely we struck gold with Nadia Turner. So Nadia hails from the mountains above Melbourne in South Australia. And it's always difficult finding an artist to interpret the visions that I have in my head. And in a way, they have a ghastly task in that they need to somehow interpret that in a way that is good for me. It's like, okay, that's fine. So, and from my dreadful sketches, my sketches are absolutely appalling, but I try my best to sketch these ideas onto paper. And Nadia just did the grandest job at interpreting that and bringing it to Technicolor life. And she did it with whimsy. I wanted it to have a whimsy, which is why sometimes some of the people in there, they might look slightly ethereal or otherworldly, because any interaction I've had with the bees has that kind of whimsical feel to it. It is it's the typical English cottage garden beehive, and somebody sitting having afternoon tea on a beautiful summer's day and the bees are buzzing about. It really is a part of my reality. It's a part of the life that I live. It's quintessentially beautiful and innocent and whimsy. And she managed to capture that, which I'm so thrilled and pleased with. And I can't stop playing with them at the moment.
That sounds like a good problem to have.
Yeah.
So tell me where people can find you online.
So people can find me on Facebook under Kristoffer Hughes. I'm Kristoffer Druid on Instagram. And I also occasionally dabble on TikTok. I'm also Kristoffer Druid on TikTok, but rarely. I find it somewhat distracting. And the Anglesey Druid Order can be found by going to angleseydruidorder.co.uk or to the Anglesey Druid Order Facebook page, where we tend to put things up quickly and quicker than they do go up on our website. And we've also ventured into the world of Twitter. It's not called Twitter anymore. Is it X or something? But that's very new. That literally only happened last week. And but yes, any of those pages, people can get a hold of me, send me a message or get in touch, whatever. Yes, very happy to be in touch with people.
Well, I will include all of those links in the show notes. And thank you so much for being here, Kristoffer. It's always such fun to talk to you. I'm so glad we got to meet this spring at Pagonicon, and I look forward to hopefully seeing you at conferences next year as well. And for the folks listening, thank you so much for listening to my weird, nerdy little dice-based interview show. If you enjoyed this episode of 4 Quick Cues Book Talk with Enfys, be sure to like, subscribe, and leave a review on your podcast app of choice. Check out more content from me, Enfys, on majorarqueerna.com. That's majorarqueerna.com. Whatever time it is, where you are as you're listening to this, I hope you have a fantastic day, and may the dice of fate roll well for you.
Thanks for listening to 4 Quick Cues.